so let's begin. So the next section that we're doing is word problems, okay? Now, what are word problems? You'll have some situation given, right? And you would have to make an equation using that given situation and then solve that to find the answers to that particular problem. Now, how do you do that? There are a couple of steps that you need to keep in mind. You have to identify the different variables that they're using in the given question, and then convert that statement into a mathematical form, right? Make an equation using that. And then you solve for those unknowns, whatever the variables are, you try to find the values of those variables. Okay? Can you please turn the fans off? Which is off. Thank you. All right. So we are just going to look at some examples now and understand how to approach word problems, how to identify the variables, how to convert that statement in a mathematical form, and how to solve for the unknowns. Let's do some examples to try to understand this better. Okay, so let's start with this one, a relatively simple example. A retail store has monthly fixed costs of $3,000 and monthly salary costs of $2,500 for each employee. If the store maintains X employees during the year, which equation represents the total cost of running the store for that year? Now, for this, you need to understand the concept of fixed cost. What is a fixed cost? That does not change due to anything, right? So the number of employees do not affect the fixed cost. If you have 10 employees, the fixed cost is still the same. If you have 1,000 employees, the fixed cost is still the same. That's a fixed number, okay? Now, what does the statement say? You have to be very careful in understanding the units given. It says monthly fixed costs are $3,000. And then they're asking you for the total cost of running the store for a year. Okay? And then the monthly salary for each employee is $2,500. What is the total cost going to be? How do you think about this? Can we figure out the monthly cost first of all? What's the monthly cost going to be? 3,000 is a fixed number that is always going to be there. Okay? So generally, whenever you have a fixed cost, that comes as a constant in an equation, right? That comes as a constant. And then, what's the variable cost? That's $2,500 per employee. This is going to be the rate at which the cost is increasing. So we'll say 2,500 times the number of employees that you have. What's the number of employees? The number of employees is X. So 2,500 times X is going to give you the variable cost for each employee. If you have one employee, the cost is 2,500. If you have 4 employees, it's 2,400 into 4 and so on. So this is what the equation would become for 1 month. 3,000 plus 2,500 times X. They've asked you for the total cost for a year. What would that be for a whole year? You just multiply this by 12. All right? So which one is that? B. Okay? Both the fixed cost and the variable cost, they are given as a monthly figure, right? So you have to multiply the whole thing by 12. Not only the fixed cost and not only the variable cost, you need to multiply the whole thing by 12. Is that okay? Now, this is a general pattern that you will see whenever you have fixed cost. Remember in the previous, the one before that, when we talked about linear models, linear relationships, when we had a function like this, a plus b times x, a used to represent the initial value, the starting value, right? In problems like these where you have a fixed cost and a variable cost, this a is going to represent the fixed cost and b is going to represent the variable cost, right? So the interpretation here is slightly different in this way, that constant represents fixed cost and this number represents the variable cost. Is that okay? Alright, let's have a look at another type of problem. So Carter traveled a total of 20 miles by jogging at 4 miles per hour and biking at b miles per hour. He spent 1 more hour jogging than biking. Which equation represents the situation where x is the number of hours spent jogging? Now they've already given you the variable themselves, right? X is the variable. So that's kind of the starting point for you. You have to make an equation using x. How do you think about this? He's traveling a total of 20 miles. And look at the equations that are given. All of them have 20 on the right side. That means the left side should represent the number of miles, right? The total number of miles. Now, how do you find the number of miles covered while jogging and the number of miles covered while biking? How do you figure that out? If you know that x is the number of hours spent jogging, x is the number of hours spent jogging, what is the number of hours spent biking? What is that going to be? X plus 1? He spent 1 more hour jogging than biking. So if jogging is x, biking should be x minus 1. Yeah, so x represents the number of hours spent jogging. So the number of hours spent biking has to be 1 less than that. Is this all right? Any problem with this? Now this is the time. Now what's the rate at which he is traveling? 4 miles per hour when he's jogging. So this represents the time, x hours and x minus 1 hours. The speed while jogging is 4 miles per hour, right? And the speed while biking is b miles per hour. What's the total number of miles that we get from this? You see, you've got hours here, miles per hour. If you want to cancel out hours, you have to multiply them, and you have a simple formula for that as well. Distance equals speed into time. So what's the distance traveled while jogging? What would that be? 4 times x. And what's the distance traveled while biking? It will be b into x minus 1. The sum of these two numbers should equal 20. Because 20 is the total number of miles traveled. Is that okay? Which option is that? That's option B. Is this all right? Any problems? Can we move on? Okay. Let's have a look at this now. The sum of 3 consecutive integers is 72. What's the largest of these 3 integers? Sum of 3 consecutive integers is 72. How do you think about this? You can start with any one of the 3 integers, right? Let's say x is the smallest integer. Remember, these are 3 consecutive integers. Let's say x is the smallest of those 3 integers. What would the other 2 be? If x is the smallest, x plus 1 and x plus 2. So these are the 3 integers that we have, x into x and x plus 1 and x plus 2, where x is the smallest. Now we can make an equation using these 3 numbers. Since the sum of these numbers has to be 72, we add these three numbers up and the result should be 72. So we say x plus 1 plus x plus 2, that should equal 72. You can solve this equation. This gives you 3x plus 3 equal to 72. X equals 69 over 3, which is 23. Is 23 your final answer? They've asked you for the largest of the three integers. X is the smallest. What's the largest? 25. 23 plus 2. Is that okay? Alternatively, you could also think of it like this, that since you want the largest of the three integers, you could call that number x. If you call the largest number x, the other two would be x minus 1 and x minus 2. In that case, the value of x would directly give you 25. That's also possible, right? In that case, the equation would become like this: x plus x minus 1 plus x minus 2, that equals 72, and that should give you x equal to 25 directly. Make sense? No? Wasn't that fairly straightforward? क्या मसला है इसमें? So you have three consecutive integers. What does that mean? Let's say one of those integers is 6. What's the other one going to be? What's the next one going to be? 6 plus 1, that's 7. And the next one is 6 plus 2, that's 8. If we call one of them x, let's say the smallest is x, what should be the next one? X plus 1. What should be the next one after that? X plus 2. So these are the three integers. Add them up together, the result should be 72. Now we assume the smallest integer to be x. So x is 23, this is the smallest. We wanted the largest, that's x plus 2, so the answer should be 25. Another possibility could be that we called the largest number x. If we call the largest of those three numbers x, the second would be x minus 1, the one less than that, and then the third would be x minus 2. And if you were to solve this equation directly, इससे आपको directly answer मिल जाता x equals 25. You could do it that way as well. Okay? No problems? All right. Let's have a look at this. Again, let's start with this. What I can do is, I can just get rid of this. Okay, how do you think about this now? One number is 3 times another number. If the sum of those two numbers is 44, what's the larger of the two numbers? How do you think about this? Yes? X equals 44? 3x equals 44? How do we think about this? We can call one of those numbers x, right? Let's say the smaller number is x, okay? If the smaller number is x, what's the larger number going to be? The other number has to be 3 times this. That will be 3x then. These are the two numbers that you have. So what does the equation become? X plus 3x should equal 44. Is that okay? So you just have to translate that statement into a mathematical form. One number is 3 times another number. So if we call one of them x, the other one would be 3x. And their sum is 44. You can find the value of x from that. That will be 11. But they asked you for the larger number. What's the larger number? 33. And that will be your final answer. Does that make sense? Okay, let's move on. 70% of children at a daycare attend full-time, and the number of full-time attendees is 150 more than part-time attendees. What's the total number of children enrolled? What do we want to find at the end? the total number of children enrolled. We can call this X, right? The total number of children enrolled. If that's the total number of children enrolled, how many attend full time? If X is the total number of children enrolled, how many of them attend full time? 70%. What is 70% of X? 0.7 times X. This is the number of full-time attendees. Now this number is 150 more than part-time attendees. We have two categories, full-time and part-time. If full-time are 0.7x, what about part-time? They should be 0.3x, 30%. If 70% attend full time, the remaining 30% they attend part time. Right? 70% children attend full time. If we call the total number of children x, what's 70% of that? 0.7x. So out of 100, let's say 70 attend full time. The rest 30 attend part time. तो वो भी देखते हैं ना, अभी तो हम सिर्फ इन वेरिएबल्स को नाम दे रहे हैं ना. If the total number is x, we know के full time is 0.7x, part time is 0.3x. Now the number of full time attendees is 150 more than the number of part time attendees. What does that mean? 0.7x minus 0.3x should equal 150. जी, 0.7x plus, why would you add it twice? Plus 150 equals x. How would that make sense? Minus 150 होगा ना? Minus 150, yes. So 0.7x minus 150, that equals x. That would make sense. So you're saying this is full time and this is part time, and their sum should be x. That should work. Okay? So 0.7x is the number of full-time employees, 0.3x is the number of part-time employees. Full-time minus part-time, since the difference is 150, this is one way to make this equation, and this is another way that you are suggesting. Both of them will give you the same result. Okay, you can try then. 0.4x equals 150, x equals 150 over 0.4, what's that? 375. That's the total number of children. Okay, you can try that equation as well. This gives us 1.4x minus 150 equals x, and that will give you 375 as well. Is that okay? Okay, let's try another one. Albert is 7 years older than Henry. In 5 years, he will be twice as old as Henry. How old is Albert now? What are we looking for? How old is Albert now? Let's call this x. If Albert is x years old right now, what about Henry? What's his age? X minus 7. This is their current age. In 5 years, Albert will be twice as old as Henry. What happens after 5 years? 5 years. What's the age of Albert now? After 5 years? If right now it's X, what's his age after 5 years? X plus 5. If his age right now is X, after 5 years it becomes X plus 5. Right? If Henry is X minus 7 right now, what's his age after 5 years? X minus 7 plus 5, that's X minus 2. Right? X minus 7 plus 5 after 5 years, his age is now going to be X minus 2. These are their ages after 5 years. Okay? And now we know the relationship between them. Albert is twice as old as Henry. That means X plus 5 should equal 2 times X minus 2. And you can find the value of X from this. This is X plus 5 equals 2X minus 4. X equals 9. This is the current age of Albert. Let me repeat. We start from what we want to find at the end. Albert's age right now. Albert's current age. ये find करना है हमें. We call that number X. Okay? If Albert's age right now is X, what about Henry's age? That's X minus 7. What happens after 5 years? Both of them become 5 years older. Right? So Albert becomes X plus 5 years old. And Henry becomes X minus 7 plus 5 years old. That's X minus 2. And then we're given, after 5 years, Albert is twice as old as Henry. So iski jo age hai, that's 2 times the age of Henry. That's what gives us an equation. And we get the value of X from this, yes. That's a good point, actually. That's a very good point. No, that's X is Albert's current age. So currently he is 7 years older than Henry. So he's currently, I'm sorry. Yeah. 1 minute. His current age is 9 and Henry's current age is 2. After 5 years, Albert is 14 and Henry is 7. X is Albert's current age. अभी तो twice नहीं है ना? He'll be twice as old as him after 5 years. X is the number that we want to find. वो Albert की current age है. ये हमने इसको कहा है current age इसकी. After 5 years, his age is going to be X plus 5. And he's twice as older as Henry after 5 years. तो उसमें हम X plus 5 यूज करेंगे. अगर करंट एज एल्बर्ट की X है तो 5 साल बाद क्या होगी? अगर अभी किसी की एज 12 इयर्स है, 5 साल बाद क्या होगी? 17 होगी. उसमें 5 ऐड कर देंगे. Does this make sense? It's a very common type of problem. ये आपको वैसे भी आम भी बहुत puzzles इस तरह के मिलते हैं, right? कि अभी ये एज है, बाद में ये हो जाएगा. तो this is how you can approach this. Yes. वो भी कर सकते हैं, हेनरी के एज के भी X कर सकते हैं. जनरली आसान हो जाता है कि जो आपको चाहिए होता है उसको आप X assume कर लो, because that will give you the final answer directly. But you can do that as well. आप ये भी कर सकते हैं. आप हेनरी की एज को X कर लें. Let me just copy this on the side. अभी की है. Albert is 7 years older than Henry currently. After 5 years, he will be twice as old as Henry. 5 साल बाद ही होएगा. अभी की एज निकालने के कारण उसका. Okay, so you can say Henry's current age is X as well, Roma. You can also start like this. Henry की age X assume कर लें. What's Albert's age right now then? X plus 7. What about after 5 years? Albert will be X plus 12 years old and Henry will be X plus 7 years old. And now we can say X plus 12 should equal 2 into X plus 7. And that gives us X plus 12 equals 2X plus 14. X equals... Have we done something wrong? Okay, I'm sorry, X plus 5, not X plus 7. X plus 5, and this is 2X plus 10, and X equals 2. This is Henry's current age. What about Albert then? X 2 plus 7, that's 9. So 9 is the final result. Is that okay? Okay, let's move on now. Let's make it slightly more complicated. After each of her workouts, Iris consumes, After each of her workouts, Iris consumes 8 ounces of a particular drink that is sold in 16-ounce bottles. (16-ounce bottle hai, and she's just consuming 8 ounces of that drink, half of that drink. Each bottle contains 20 grams of protein. She would like to increase her protein intake by 3 grams after each workout. Which equation can she use to determine how many additional ounces of the drink she should consume after each workout? How do you think about this? So X is the number of additional ounces that she would need to drink. Currently she is drinking 8 ounces. She wants to increase her intake by 3 grams. How can we think of this? Okay. What's the ratio of the drink and protein? What's the ratio? 16-ounce bottle, 16 ounces of drink, they have 20 grams of protein. That's the ratio, right? 4:5. So we can say 16 ounces corresponds to 20 grams of protein, right? What do you want to figure out? You want to increase the protein intake by 3 grams. So if 20 grams is what a 16 ounces bottle has, what about 3 grams? You can just use ratios. Let's say X ounces के अंदर 3 grams है. So we just use ratios like this, right? 16 over 20, that equals X over 3. It's a simple ratio problem where you can make an equation using ratios. So this is kind of irrelevant. It's not being used anywhere. Right? We're just interested in the difference, and that this is something that happens sometimes in SAT problems, that they give you additional information that is not relevant to the problem. So यहाँ पे we are not using 8 ounces anywhere. So you don't necessarily have to use all the information given in the question. Sometimes you can work out the answer without using all information. ठीक है? So what do you get from this? So this is the equation that I'm getting. Now you can compare which of these equations it corresponds to. Now you don't have 13 here, so you can just cross out the equations containing 13. Which of the other two is it? If we take 3 to the left side and 20 and 16 to the right, it becomes this. 20x over 16 is 3, that is C. Is that okay? No problems? Let's move on. Let's try this. Jake runs 60 yards per minute. Amy runs 20 yards per minute for 10 minutes and then slows down to 20 yards per minute. After how many minutes will Jake and Amy have run the same distance? So they should have run the same distance. Can we make an equation in which we have distance run by Jake on one side and distance run by Amy on the other side and just equate them? What are we looking to find out? After how many minutes they would have run the same distance? Let's call this T, right? T represents time, let's say. This is what we want to find out, okay? So that's the first step, identify the variable. This is what you want to find out. After T minutes, what's the distance run by Jake? T minutes में Jake कितना रन कर लेगा? T minutes में कितना रन कर लेगा? 60 yards per minute. What does that mean? This is the speed, right? Yards per minute. Time is T. Distance is speed into time. या आप units का भी सोच सकते हैं. Yards per minute into minutes. Minutes and minutes will get cancelled out. We'll have yards left. So the distance run by Jake is 60 times T. Is that okay? What about the distance run by Amy? $120 into 10 plus 20 T 20T. Okay. थोड़ा सा मसला है. For the first 10 minutes, he is. Yes, that's for the first 10 minutes. अच्छा, इसमें एक condition दी हुई है उसने. Let me write that here as well. T is greater than 10. Okay, so more than 10 minutes have passed until they have run the same distance. Okay, तो 10 minutes से कम का time नहीं है, 10 minutes से ज़्यादा का time है. Now, given that, how much distance has she traveled during the first 10 minutes? 120 yards per minute for 10 minutes. What's the distance? 120 times 10. That's the distance that she has covered during the first 10 minutes. What happens after that? After the first 10 minutes have passed, now she is running at 20 yards per minute. Now the speed is 20 yards per minute. So 20 into time. Right? अब time में हम क्या लिखेंगे यहाँ पे? T plus 10. Remember, what does t represent? T represents the time that has passed since the beginning. 10 minutes have already passed. Let's assume they've both run for 12 minutes. Let's assume they've both run for 12 minutes. Now this is very important. Please pay attention. Let's assume they've both run for 12 minutes. What's the distance traveled by Amy? 120 into 10 plus 20 times what? 20 times 2 basically, right? Where does 2 come from? 12 minus 10. Total time agar 12 hai, so 10 minutes have already passed. For the remaining 2 minutes, she's traveling at 20 yards per minute. तो अगर ये 12 की जगह पे t होता, if it was t minutes, 10 minutes are already gone. The time that we take here should be t minus 10. Does that make sense? You can try inputting a value here as well. Let's say t was 11. What does that mean? 120 into 10 plus 20 into 11 minus 10. फिर 1 मिनट के लिए वो 20 yards per minute पे travel किया उसने. ठीक है? If t was 13, that means for the first 10 minutes, she covered this much distance. And then for the remaining 3 minutes, which is going to come from 13 minus 10, she traveled at 20 yards per minute. So the time that you take here has to be t minus 10. G. Zara, yes. ये 12 और t वगैरह कहाँ से है? 12 was just an example that I was giving to understand why we are putting t minus 10 here. t क्या represent करे? t represent करे time from the beginning. I was giving an example कि let's say 17 minutes have passed. Let's assume कि 17 minutes गुजर गए हैं उनको भागते हुए. Okay? For the first 10 minutes, Amy is traveling at 120 yards per minute. For the first 10 minutes. उसमें distance travel कितना हो गया? 1200. 120 times 10. Now out of 17 minutes, how many minutes are left? 7. For the remaining 7 minutes, she's now traveling at 20 yards per minute. So बाकी distance कैसे होएगा? 20 into 7. How have we gotten to this number 7? It's 17 minus 7. 17 minus 10, sorry. Now if it was t instead of 17 तो हमने assume किया ना? Generally तो वो हम time को t assume कर रहे हैं. So if it was t, it would be t minus 10. Okay? Allah Hafiz. Is this all right? And now you can solve this equation, find the value of t that you get from this. 60t equals 1200 plus 20t minus 200. 40t equals 1000 and t equals 25 from this. So it takes 25 minutes for them to travel the same distance. Is this okay? दोबारा से? क्या मिनट्स वाला कैंसिल होना यहाँ के स्पीड इंटू टाइम कर रहे हैं ना बेसिकली डिस्टेंस इज स्पीड इंटू टाइम वो तो मैंने एक अल्टरनेटिव आपको बताया था बट डिस्टेंस इज स्पीड इंटू टाइम दैट्स व्हाट वी आर डूइंग yards per minute is the speed right 60 into t this is speed into time speed is 60 t is time similarly here 120 is speed 10 is time 20 is speed t minus 10 is the time take speed into time कर रहे हैं Is this all right? Okay. Now another very tricky type of problem. You'll see this a number of times in the problem sets that I gave you. These are called mixture problems, and they're quite tricky as well. A tank contains 30 liters of a 10% of this solution. ये कोई chemical है जो भी है. How many liters of a 50% solution must be added to the tank to obtain a 20% solution? Now, what does that mean? क्या लिखा हुआ है? You have 30 liters of this solution. 10% means कि अगर आपके पास 30 liters है, उसमें से 3 liters जो होंगे, they will be of this acetone. ये क्या होता है? Chemical है? अच्छा, nail polish. So that's a chemical, right? Yeah, technically that's a chemical. So 10% of that. What does that mean? 30 liters में 3 liters acetone. How many liters of a 50% acetone solution? You have another solution जिसके अंदर 50% acetone है. For example, अगर उसमें 10 liters होंगे, उसमें 5 liters acetone के होंगे. So one solution is 10% and the other is 50%. How many liters of this 50% solution must be added to obtain a 20% acetone solution that the final result contains 20% acetone? How do you think about this now? What are we looking for? How many liters of a 50% acetone must be added? Let's call this X. Let's call this number X. How many liters of this solution we need to add? Okay. What do you have currently? अभी acetone के कितने liters हैं? Can we figure that out? 30 liters में 10% जो है वो acetone है. So what's the amount of acetone that we have right now? 30 into 0.1. 30 का 10%, that's 30 into 0.1. What's the amount of acetone that we have in the other solution? What's the amount of acetone that we have in the other solution? 0.5 times X. X into 0.5. This is the amount of acetone that we have in the other solution. Is that okay? Any problem with this? When we add them up together, the numerator is giving us the amount of acetone. All right? What's the total amount of solution now? Once we mix them up, what's the total amount of solution that we have? 30 liters from here and X liters from here. The total amount of solution becomes 30 plus X. Is that okay? Numerator is giving you the amount of acetone. The denominator is giving you the total amount of the solution. Amount of acetone divided by the total amount of that solution. This should give you the percentage of acetone in that solution, right? इसको हम 100%, 100 से multiply कर दें, let's say. We want this number to be 20%. Does that make sense? Or in other words, we could say 30 into 0.1 plus X into 0.5 divided by 30 plus X should equal 0.2. This number should give you 0.2 as the result. Does that make sense? Let me repeat what we have done. We had 30 liters of a 10% acetone solution and 50 x liters of a 50% acetone solution. In the final result, we want a 20% acetone. That means final result हमें 20% चाहिए. If we are calling this x, in the numerator we can have the amount of acetone, that is 30 into 0.1 plus x into 0.5, and in the denominator we have the total amount of solution, that's 30 plus x. So ये percentage जो है वो 20% होनी चाहिए. That gives us an equation. We can solve this equation to find the value of x. Any questions on this? Yes. इससे आगे कैसे सॉल्व करना है? मुझे समझ नहीं आया क्या कह रहे हैं. क्रॉस मल्टीप्लिकेशन किस तरह से? अच्छा, जो आप ओ लेवल्स में इस तरह करते थे कि 10% है तो 100% इज 30, तो 10% कितना होएगा? तो यू क्रॉस मल्टीप्लाई दिस, 100x equals 300. You can do that if you have to calculate one single percentage. जब multiple percentages इस तरह से एक जगह इकट्ठी आ रही है ना, तो वो बहुत टाइम टेकिंग हो जाएगा. हमको अलग अलग हर एक को इस तरह से करेंगे. I would really highly recommend that you get comfortable with these factor multiplications. We learned this in percentages earlier as well. If you want to find 10% of something, all you have to do is multiply it by 10%. 10% is 10 over 100, which is 0.1. If you have to calculate 50% of something, that means multiply by 50 over 100, which is 0.5. You can do it this way as well, लेकिन वो बहुत टाइम टेकिंग हो जाएगा. O levels में आप कर सकते थे because you just had to calculate one percentage at a time. But here you have to calculate multiple percentages and make a single equation out of that. तो वो बहुत लेंथी हो जाएगा उस तरह से. Is this all right? Now we can solve this equation and see what that gives us. 0.1 into 3, that is 3, plus 0.5 times x. We can multiply this number on the other side. 0.2 into 30, 6, plus 0.2 times x. 0.3x equals 3, and the value of x is 10. So we need to add 10 liters of this solution so that the total amount of acetone is 20%. Is that okay? Now you'll see exactly the same problem with numbers changed in past papers again and again. This is how you would approach this. No problem? Sorry, yes? Yeah, one last question, then we have a break. Okay, so this is the solution that we did there. We started with x being the amount of acetone solution added. We already have 3 liters of acetone there. ये equation आपकी उससे बन गई. Percentage आपने 0.2 से equate कर दी, 20% से equate कर दी. Okay? Alright, one last problem before we have a break. This is another type of problem. It's called work rate problems. Take 30 seconds, read the question statement, and we'll have a look at this. Okay, so how do we approach this? Hania, are you done with this? No? Okay, when Alex and Bari work separately from each other, Alex can paint a house in 6 days and Bari can paint a house in 12 days. Assuming that they work at a constant rate, how many days will it take both of them to paint a house if they work together? This is a standard work rate problem. Alex can paint a house in 6 days. How much can he paint in 1 day? How much of the house can he paint in 1 day? 1/6. If he's painting the whole house in 6 days, in 1 day, he can paint 1/6 of the house. इसको हम कहते हैं rate of work. Rate of work for Alex is 1/6. This rate is 1/6. Okay? This is the rate at which Alex is working. The rate of work for Bari is 1/12 because every day he can paint 1/12 of the house. Is that okay? Now, if they're working together, how much of the house can they paint in 1 day? How much of the house can they paint in 1 day? In 1 day, they can paint 1/6 plus 1/12. Right? उनके एक बंदा 1/6 कर रहा है, दूसरा 1/12 कर रहा है. This is the total rate. This is the combined rate for both of them. This is the rate at which both of them work together. Is that okay? What does this turn out to be? Calculator में डालें. That gives you 1/4, right? 3/12 and that's 1/4. This is their combined rate of work. Okay? So how many days can they paint a house now? 4 days, right? This is the formula that we have for work rate. W equals R times T, where W represents the work done. This is the rate of work, and this is the time taken. Okay? Now, of course, the rate of work and time, they should be consistent. अगर rate जो है वो number of days पे है कि 6 days में उसने किया है, तो ये time भी number of days होना चाहिए. They have to be consistent. So once we know that this is the combined rate, we can say work done equals rate into time. Work done कितना है? 1 house paint करना है, so that's 1. Rate is 1/4. Time taken, so that gives you T equal to 4. This is the number of days that it takes them to paint a house if they work together. Is that okay? This is called a work rate problem. This is the formula that we have. W equals RT. Okay? W represents amount of work done, R is the rate of work, T is the time taken. The combined rate is the sum of their individual rates. Right? One rate was 1/6, the other was 1/12. If you want to find the combined rate, we just add them up together. Okay? That's how you approach work rate problems. You cannot do it like this कि 6 days में एक कर रहा है, दूसरा 12 में कर रहा है, तो 6 और 12 को नहीं ऐड कर सकते. 1/6 plus 1/12 ये ऐड कर सकते. ओके 6 और 12 को ऐड करके 1/18 नहीं बना सकते, ठीक है।